Right, now question number 2 wasn't answered very well in general. A lot of students lost a few marks on it. It's talking about building a new power station, and the company must decide between 2 renewable projects. We've got either a geothermal power station or a solar power station. Now you've got to explain how the location and the climate might affect the type of power station that the company chooses. So it's out of 4 marks. We're really looking for 2 marks based on location and 2 marks based on climate. Now the location can affect the climate, but we'll try and keep those factors separate for now. So I'm going to go through what it shows on the mark scheme for this question. Now when it comes to location, the kind of things we're looking for, well, in terms of solar power station, the latitude at which the power station is built will make a difference. Obviously at the equator it's going to be much more suitable, and that's due to the sun's angle. So if you've mentioned anything about latitude, the angle of the sun, or the fact that you're on the equator, then that's worth a mark. Now the other thing is that the suitability of the site. Example, for the solar power we need quite a large area of site because we need to cover that area with solar power. It might be that we don't want to build it in the hills and in mountains, at least in the valleys anyway, because we don't want to have shadows there. So some kind of comment on the suitability of the site for solar power, in terms of either the area or the kind of relief of the area, is worth a mark. Then when it comes to geothermal, mentioning something about the geological factor to do with the location. So if you say if it's an area of volcanic activity, or it's somewhere where there's hot rocks close to the surface or an accessible source of heat or hot water. Lots of people mention that you can only have a geothermal power station in areas that are hot. That is not the case. Lots of geothermal power stations in places like Iceland, New Zealand, things which aren't hot countries, they just happen to have hot rocks quite close to the surface. So it doesn't have to be a hot country. Other people mention something to do with this, proximity to population and cities, but for the wrong reasons. We would like to locate our power stations as close to populations and cities as possible, particularly for geothermal power stations where they can be combined heat and power stations. So they're not just creating electricity, they're also generating hot water that we can then use for central heating systems. So it's an advantage for any kind of power station to be close to where the people are. When it comes to climate, we're looking at seasonal effect. For example, somewhere like Bangkok where there's a rainy season, and it can be quite cloudy, is not so good for solar power. Other things like the hours of sunlight, obviously that's going to be a factor that changes throughout the year, but if you get sun all year, then that's a good factor for solar power. If the winter days are short, that's not such a good thing for solar power. We can also talk about factors that affect the intensity of sunlight. So if it's cloudy, if there's strong sun intensity at that location, then those are all good things for solar power. And there would be a mark for saying that the geothermal power station is not affected by the climate. The location, yes, but the actual climate, the weather conditions around it, don't make any difference to the power output.